All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Got a very special guest today, a gentleman that Scott and I have had the privilege of kind of working with early on in our career. And this particular guest of ours has had about a 35-year career in leadership in companies that are small, medium, and large size. He's a leadership guru, as seen on CNN, Fox News, a number of other stations. He's an author 8 times over. And he's, like I said, he's worked for a number of small, medium, and large companies, and really in that spin of leadership challenging and enabling and really unlocking the power of the people in all industries and all business. He's internationally respected and regarded. He's got a voice for radio and a face for TV, which is a great combination. And both Scott and I, like I said, have had the privilege to work with him early on in our career. Ladies and gentlemen, it is our pleasure to welcome John Graci to our humble podcast. John, what makes you so eager to get involved in the business of enabling those leaders and the people to kind of rise up and be better?
Put it this way, I do what I do because I want to make a difference. I want to make an impact like everybody else, right? I want to help leaders understand they're not alone out there. In addition to that, I want to help businesses. And for years, I was a solution without a problem. I love to talk, and you know that, John and Scott. I love to talk and nothing to talk about. I went to radio school. Radio was fun. It was a blast, right? Didn't pay the bills. Went to River Falls. Okay, got the degree. Didn't know what I was going to talk about, and then one day it happened. Met a gentleman by the name of Ross Reiches, brilliant communicator. In a span of 3 hours, he had a group of leaders on the edge of their seats. Why? Because he was communicating actionable, specific traits, advice to leaders on what they could apply in the workplace immediately. And I picked up on real quickly what he was doing. He was making the complex simple. He was teaching leadership, not out of a textbook, but from the trenches. And that's where I got my calling. Ross taught me, I'm going to give him credit right now. He taught me no-fluff leadership. So I think you're going to see over the next half hour, I believe some of the most effective ways to work with people are simple things to do, simple things to keep in mind. Too often leaders want to play the role of a victim. That's what they want to do. I get leaders to look in the mirror and ask, are you a part of the problem or are you part of the solution? So that's the angle I'd like to take. And I'm sure you guys would like to see it as well here today.
That's fun. That's fun. How did you get started? I mean, you were in corporate career. I think you worked at a radio station early on, right? You did some Gene Fortune, I believe, was your name. Was that the name? The radio name? Yeah.
Yes, that is actually correct. That was.
And what type of radio station was it, John, that you started at?
It was 1400 KLBB, the music of your life. The music traditionalists would have listened to back in the day, John. So now you're really dating me. Go ahead, keep going.
I am, but you know, what's that, Scott?
KLBB. I remember that call sign.
Yeah. Some big band in there, if I remember correctly. But you and I and Scott had a chance to meet early on at U.S. Bank, and working for a large bank institution that at the time we were going through a number of acquisitions, a lot of uncertainty and those kind of things. And as young, kind of employees, I say we were individual contributors for the most part. Right. And getting into leadership and thinking about leadership, what was it about some of those first kind of experiences that you had that really translated over into maybe what you wrote in some of your books and how you've kind of honed that into your messages today? What was that journey like for you, and why was it so impactful?
Well, put it this way, I wouldn't be where I'm here today unless I had some good and bad leaders in the past. And I had a leader at the time, his name was Dick Jones. I'm sure that name kind of gives you chills when you hear it. You know how some people brighten up a room when they enter it? Well, he brightened up a room when he left it. Okay. I only bring him up because he may have been either the worst boss I had or maybe one of the better ones, because I had a boss. You and I both had the same leader, Sharon Champion, many, many years ago. Mm-hmm. I really enjoyed working for Sharon. In fact, I would work 70 hours a week and the company only paid me for 40.
Right.
My wife thought there was something going on at work. I'm not kidding. I said, yeah, I'm my boss. I really am. And I'll tell you why, because she understood me. She understood the most basic needs that people have in the workplace, and she was hitting home at them each and every day. And I had lunch with her many, many years ago. And I said, Sharon, what made you so good? And she said, John, it's not that difficult. Just think of the worst leader you ever had. Jot down everything they did to tick you off. And I bet you it falls under a leader's job description. You are the straw that stirs the drink. And that really kind of hit home with me on how she dealt with you. She dealt with colleagues, coworkers, and other leaders. And, wisdom is your ability to apply your knowledge from the past. I got a lot of gray hair, which means I've made a lot of mistakes. And don't be too hard on yourself. It's just your ability to learn and get up and dust yourself off.
Yeah. And leadership can be a really lonely place, especially if you're trying to, like Sharon did, clear the deck up and out of the organization to make you and enable you to do the best work you could do. So I see that a lot in leaders where they're not necessarily, in your day-to-day work, right? They know you're going to do the best you can, do the best of your skill sets, and you're putting in a lot of effort to learn, grow, and to deliver. But I think great leaders clear the deck so the people underneath them can do the best work that they can do. Is that what you often see, John?
That is absolutely correct. And as I take a step back and just observe what Sharon did and did not do, okay, she understood the conundrum. And the conundrum was when she comes to work every day, she has to balance human relations, compassion with profitability, proficiency. And she understood that. And she understood, okay, that as she went out and applied the fundamentals of leadership, as she went out and approached the people not doing it on behalf of the people who were actually doing the job, as she played a role in your growth and development, as she'd applied the fundamentals, she was naturally balancing human relations with proficiency and profitability. And she didn't get that way overnight. It takes skills to be effective. And so that leader that we all wanted to follow at one time or another, they didn't wake up one night in the morning and say, I'm good. No, it took a series of experiences, falling down, getting back up, learning. Blaming is looking back, preventing is looking forward. So yeah, she wasn't lucky. She was good at what she did, no doubt.
Yeah, I would agree. Even in the in the tenuous situations that we found ourselves in some cases, we were part of, John, and you and I were part of the quality team. And if you think about contact centers in general, the ability to kind of translate to your point, kind of what those leaders, what Sharon did as a great leader, and what we were trying to do to enable those people that talk to the customers day in and day out about money that they didn't have and were challenging us on. It was a lot of practice and repeat and messaging, and not every agent that you and I talked to, as we shared kind of our opinion about their quality and those kind of things, we tailored those messages for each person as we got to know them a little bit better. And this was a size, what did we have, 300 or so agents or something like that? I mean, it was a big group. And yet we got to the point, and I can still name a number of those agents, as I'm sure you can, because we were in those intimate conversations with them. And how have you, do you enjoy, as you kind of have stepped up onto stage, I'll call it stage in quotes, right, a little bit more as you do physically, but have you gotten closer, even though you've stepped back and kind of brought your message up a little bit and gotten really interested in kind of the individual lives that you're touching when you go into different companies? What does that look like for you?
You know what? I floundered for many, many years, and I was always looking for somebody to kind of help me out when I was initially a leader out there. And today I just get a high when people come back and say, you know what, John, when you said, if you're not coaching it, you're allowing it. I can't tell you how many times I've used that phrase, John and Scott. If I don't let Scott know right now, he's got a piece of spinach wedged between his teeth, just making it up, Scott. Okay. Because I'm so afraid of hurting his feelings, right? I'm not doing him any favors. To be unclear is to be unkind. All right. And so I have the same message. I like to go ahead and improve upon it every year, but I will tell you things I brought up many, many years ago that I brought up here today. People will come back at the Mall of America when I see them, okay, by chance, and they'll say, you know what? You really struck home. Silence does produce agreement. If I don't approach an individual, I become part of the problem. I'm sanctioning it. I can't sit and complain about it, right? And so when I have conversations like students in my attendees, whether it's keynoting, training, podcasting, I still get a high on that because I know it takes skills to be effective as a leader. And what got you here won't get you there. Just because you're good at doing it, providing it, selling it, servicing it, does not mean you're going to be good at confronting a Gen X, a Gen Y, a Gen Z. It takes skills and it takes courage to approach it when they're not doing what we want them to do. Yeah.
That's great. So what you've been an author 8 times, I believe, and probably more than that, just in kind of how you've authored your content and those kind of things. What made you decide writing a book was a good idea, point in time, or talk through that a little bit about putting stuff down on paper that has to be finished at some point and you can't go back and edit? What was that like?
I've enjoyed 8 books. My 9th one, my wife says we're going to have to get an attorney because I just devote too much time to them. Okay. I think it kind of comes selfish. I think we just want to leave a legacy. Okay. We all have no idea when our time is going to be up. You know what? And so I just want people to be able to look back and say, yeah, this guy here 30, 40, 50 years ago, what he said is still true here today. Right. So I guess you can say it's more or less a documented approach to let people know that I tried to make a difference and try something that worked for me, and maybe it'll work for you one of these days. That was my whole approach.
Love it. I love that. That's fantastic.
How long did it take from concept to authorship? I'm just curious. How long does that cycle take from I have an idea of a topic for a specific book to it's on the shelves and ready to be sold?
Took me about from beginning to end, I'd say 4 or 5 months. 4 or 5
Wow, that's pretty fast.
And the hardest part was just getting started. And then once you get started, you just type and you write, you type, you talk, right? Well, just let it come out. You're just letting it come out. And then you have somebody else pick it apart, and you pick it apart, somebody else pick it apart. And eventually you get there.
Yeah, storytelling is a huge part of our business, I believe, in talking through we're here and we know we want to go to here, and associating kind of someone else's journey along the way tends to be a good way for us to call it demystify or give a little bit more energy to, yeah, this is a big change, but we'll take it in bite-sized pieces. And, those journeys and those stories have been, I would say, a critical part of Scott and my kind of formation of how our business started in 2009 to all the way to today. And when we sell, it doesn't feel like we're selling. It feels like we're just relating to and telling stories. How much of your message, and I can already tell, just in talking to you and catching up, that storytelling is a big part of your message as well. But to your point, like earlier, clarity and no fluff can kind of get in the way of a little bit of that storytelling. How do you balance those and make sure your message is brought out very clear?
Yes, I throw a whole lot of facts and details out there, but you're absolutely correct. When you can sew in a story, it becomes more meaningful. And everything that I teach applies back at home and in the workplace. Let me give you a quick example. Okay, misunderstandings have one parent. They don't teach kids this stuff in school. Now, it's the sender's job to make sure the receiver understands exactly what's being communicated. You send out an email, you send out a text, people misinterpret it. It's your fault. It's the sender's fault. Sender, all right? Misunderstandings have one parent. And people will say, yeah, I get that. Okay. All right. If everyone's responsible, then no one's responsible. Well, what does that mean? Okay. If we're all responsible for cleaning up the cubicle, nobody's responsible for cleaning up that cubicle. Right.
Right.
And so I think about this. Many years ago, I went to Arby's. My whole family went to Arby's. Okay. Daughter couldn't wait. Throw that in ham and Swiss so fast. See, Arby's had a promotion. If you feel like you received acceptable customer service, you're supposed to ring a bell on the way out. And when you rang that bell, someone is supposed to say thank you and appreciate it. Daughter could not wait to ring that bell. I mean, I'm telling you, she hit that bell and not one person from behind the counter reacted or responded. She just saw the disappointment on her face. Now, my son Matt said, Gina, you didn't do it hard enough. Ding. That's 2 dings at the Cottage Grove Arby's. And again, not one team member reacted or responded, said nothing. Looked at my wife and I said, Lori, please take the kids out to the truck. Oh, Jack. She calls me Jack Bauer, and I try to say,
I love it.
Lori, there's a boss practicing management on a license and they need my help. Well, just make it 2 minutes. Okay, I can do that. Okay. Walked up to the counter, young looking gal, asked to speak with the leader. Why? Because that's where the buck stops. Ever have a good experience, bad experience? Let the leader know. About a half minute later, some jolly looking fella comes from the back room looking like John Candy, goofy looking hat. Hey, what's up here, sir? Understand you got this promotion where we ring a bell and you guys are supposed to say thank you and appreciate it? Oh, yeah, this is going nationwide. Time out, time out. My son and daughter both rang that bell, and not one of your team members reacted or responded. Some nationwide campaign you got going on there. He looked at me as if he were a crazed or dazed German Shepherd, looked back at his team, looked back at me, leaned over the counter and said, you know how hard it is to find good people these days? No, all I simply said is, do you know how hard it is to find good leaders these days? You see where that leader at the first sign of friction wanted to throw his team members under the bus? See, if everyone's responsible for answering that bell, getting back to the customer, nobody is responsible. Everybody's responsibility is nobody's responsibility. And you want another story? Because we've all done it. When we get done having a customer chew out our backside, or maybe a leader chew out our backside, we'll go back to our laptop and we'll come up with a shotgun memo. One or two people are not doing what they should be doing. It would be take courage to confront those one or two people. No, I'm going to give a memo to everybody. So watch what happens. Goober and Gomer are the one who get the memo. Hey, folks, we've all done this before. Hang in there. Goober and Gomer get the menu. They're the ones not doing their share, right? They look at this memo and say, this doesn't apply to me. Must apply to Sharon. Sharon gets the same memo and comes back and says, I'm a little bit confused. I thought I was doing what you wanted me to do. You were. Then why did I get the memo? Because I lacked the intestinal fortitude to let people know when they weren't doing what they were doing. Folks, we've all done it. Happens all the time. See, there I sewed in some facts and details with real life stories, and we all have been there before.
And you reinforced it in your personal life. I think that's such an important part of, again, as you're enabling new leaders, or at least for me, Sharon was a great leader that you and I were exposed to at the same time. And I had the fortune with Scott at Best Buy to have a really good leader, Julie Owen, who personality wise, I didn't match very well with her from how she made decisions and everything, but she tailored her approach with me as a new leader at Best Buy in a very growing, kind of environment there. And really shared a lot of those things that were made it so that it wasn't just work for me, but it changed my DNA. It really created the integrity and the established kind of what kind of leader do I want to be and what kind of leader do I not want to be. And I think those reinforcements in your own personal life or when no one's watching as the true form of how you define integrity. And it doesn't mean that I haven't made mistakes and I'm not a hypocrite about that, but certainly in all reality, having someone that models it can tap into what it was that I needed at the time. I needed that from Sharon when we were at the bank, and really it helped Scott and I figure out what Infinite Green really wanted, what we wanted to be when we first started, and we spent a lot of time really defining what it is that our mission, our vision was, and we've never changed that in 17 years. But it really goes back to when no one's looking and your family's there or they're not there, when do you reinforce what it is that you're trying to promote across the business? I just got a comment this morning on LinkedIn from a podcast that I did from someone who worked for me early on at Best Buy. And he said, John, he goes, you've always had that true north on the compass, whether that, was beneficial to you or it hurt you in the process, you never wavered from that true north on the compass. And I love that answer to my question, John, because you didn't answer it with just a couple of facts like this. You told a story about telling a story, and you used the example very well. And I just really appreciate that. But having leaders that can model that for us, I believe, is something that is needed in the world today. I think there's too much individualism. Just me personally, I believe that there's too much kind of thinking about yourself and not enough about kind of the halo of destruction or enablement that comes with you as an individual contributor or a leader or somebody that wants to be someone different.
John, talk a little bit about accountability from your perspective. We talked about role modeling the example that you want everyone to follow. I think your Harvey's example was great there. Talk about, how leaders hold people accountable in your mind. What does that look like? How is that successful at successful companies?
Put it this way: if a team member is not doing what they should be doing, right? It could be the material, it could be the method, it could be Mother Nature, it could be a measurement. I don't want people focusing on that. That's somebody else's expertise. Okay.
Mhm.
I just want people focused on whether they, the leaders, doing their job. So if indeed Goober's made a mistake, how about we turn it into a situation? Hey, Goober, mind if I ask a few questions like what happened, why, and what we can do differently? Why? I got to see if I've done my job in getting you up to speed. Now, Goober can't answer what happened and why. I have failed him. Whether I've trained him or somebody else has trained him, the buck does stop with me, right? And then what
Mhm.
can we do differently to prevent this from occurring again? Now, I think it's important to get people involved because we all had that leader that liked to give speeches. And when leader gives speeches, we do our best imitation of a bobblehead doll. Okay. And now we're breeding the grounds of having a miscommunication. I didn't know you meant that. You're right. And so I like to get out of the telling game, get into the asking questions game to see if I've met my job, my obligation in getting people up to speed. We live in a victim-like society. Everybody wants to be the victim. Everyone wants to point the blame, point the finger. Hard to find good people these days. Well, guess what? It's hard to find good communicators these days too. It cuts both ways, right? And so I think John and you guys are both getting at a good point. You don't work with people, you work with weird people who've not been raised in our house. And I say that in a nice way. Okay.
Yeah.
You have what's called the golden rule, do unto others, do unto done to yourself. So guess what? Let's apply the golden rule right now. I like to be recognized in front of a large group of people. Right. So if I'm going to take the golden rule, I'm going to apply it to John. Hey, John, I'm going to recognize you in front of the rest of the group. John underneath might be thinking, what? I got to work with these people here. No, but John, I like to, and our leaders used to do it. You know what? So thus, I'm going to do it with you. How about we do the platinum rule? How about I ask John, how do you prefer to be recognized? John, do I recognize you often enough? Hey, John, am I getting back to you often enough on how you're doing? And see, I'm a big advocate of the platinum rule. It's not about me. It's not about being selfish. It's about the team. I'm basically being held accountable in hopes that they make a choice to work faster, harder, and smarter. So how about approach them the way I'd want a son or daughter, niece or nephew to be approached?
Yeah, that's a good point. I remember it brings me back to a story at U.S. Bank way back when, going back the years again. I had a new boss. His name was Scott Scoville. Remember Scott?
Yes.
He could write upside down, left-handed. It was really weird. He had that kind of brain. Anyway, he taught me. He wasn't a very outwardly nice person, right? He wasn't the jovial, how you doing kind of guy. He was very straightforward and very matter of fact, and it made him very hard to approach. Okay, but him teaching accountability was a really interesting exercise for our team. We had a team of managers, all with their own call center stats, right? And the first time we had a meeting, he said, "Bring your stats, bring your team's performance records, and we're going to go through them." And that was the expectation. So I brought my stats and highlighted a few things, knowing full well that I'm going to have to talk about a few people, and maybe I'm working with on whatever. And I don't think the other leaders in the room really understood the exercise, which was he wanted to have a conversation about how you're performing, right? How are you teaching people, and how are you engaging in your team? And there were people that didn't even come with their stats. And he would say, "Go and get them. We'll wait." And the whole leadership team would wait, and they had to leave the room sheepishly, right, and come back. And in the first couple of those meetings, it took, they were scheduled for an hour, and they took all day.
Mm-hmm.
And it really taught me, a little bit about fortitude, right? For a leader to sit up there and said, "Well, wait, go get your numbers," right, and not in a mean way. Just we're going to review these, and taught me a lot about accountability. I got the drill pretty quickly. Some of the leaders didn't. They would fight them, and have conversations about excuses on why they couldn't and what their team couldn't do. And it's like I was just honest. It's like, hey, I'm really having a hard time performance managing this one person. Does anybody have any suggestions? And he thought that was the greatest question ever, because now we're having a conversation about how, what the team thinks I should do to help performance manage this person. But people just they didn't really appreciate his level of how he articulated and socialized his ideas. But if you didn't feel a sense of accountability after those meetings, you were crazy. You didn't get it. But I really appreciated it really taught me the discipline of accountability. Not just him. He didn't come into a room and start, the speeches, as you mentioned. He came into the room and asked questions. And if someone didn't have an answer, he would wait. And the room would be quiet for 5 minutes, the most uncomfortable room ever. Right? No one talking for 5 minutes is very uncomfortable, but he
would write what he was talking about upside down so that you could read it. And he was doing that. So
not in
it
a
was
malicious way.
No, but what the funny part of that, John, before you jump in, is so fast forward to 2001, excuse me. I'm at American Express Financial. Unfortunate 9/11 happens. The day of 9/11, I knew that Scott Scoville was at American Express in New York City. And he lived in World Trade 6, I believe, with his wife and a new baby. And we had connected from that experience because Scott and I were in leadership at US Bank at the same time. This was before a quality run. And I had reached out to him and said, "Hey, I really appreciated, what you did," kind of telling that same story that Scott said. And he basically told me, "What are you doing now for American Express?" And he asked those same questions, like, "How are you adding value?" And it was great because it reinforced and I could share the journey that I took, through that process. And at the time we were doing a bunch of brokerage transformation work, and I was leading it from a data perspective. And but I had checked in on 9/11, and he had to move his wife and his new baby across the bay to Philadelphia because his building basically fell down. And so he had called me back after that and said, "John, thank you so much for reaching out." He goes, "A lot of people didn't necessarily take my leadership style." I can't remember how he said it, but probably positively. But he said it means a lot that you reached out, and that's not a pat on the back for me, but those leaders that didn't necessarily make it the club, and it wasn't just a comfortable thing. Those are the ones that you remember, and the ones that really impact you in a different way. And I would say Sharon was like that. Julie was like that. They weren't always fun and games and just a fun club. It was, man, we were down to work because it was work. So anyway, sorry to jump in there, John. That was just an extra part of that Scott Scoville piece that I will always remember. And Scott and I were right there in the trenches trying to figure out how to manage, accountability at the time when we were just growing.
It's interesting. I didn't know Scott that well. I knew of him, but I can tell you this: he was analytical,
Mm-hmm.
fact
He was
oriented individual. And we need more people like that because 80% of our world happens to be 1-4 thinkers. Now, let me clarify real quick. 1-4 thinker means John Bloom has a headache, goes to the doctor, and the doctor says frontal lobotomy. We're going to carve a quarter of your brain out. Doctor went from problem to solution, right? And we would basically sue any doctor for malpractice. Yet leaders will do that every day. It's almost like they forget steps 2 and 3. See, in Scott's mind, everything was a situation. And he started asking questions, getting facts, getting underlying issues as to what was causing that situation. He was disciplined, opinion versus fact, not jump into solutions so quickly, right? And so both of you are on the analytical side. I know that for a fact. A lot of the people out there are on the brainstorming side, the creative side. They don't want to ask questions. They'd rather just throw ideas against the wall and see if they stick. And so I think it's important to have somebody who's a factual, data-oriented individual who knows how to get out of the telling game and ask questions game. But also we need to get some creativity from people when the timing is right, because you can't solve, you can't fix what you don't. And Scott knew that. Mr. McIntyre knows that. Mr. Bloom knows that. You can't solve, you can't fix what you don't understand. And that's what they were doing. Yeah.
Great. So how about Gracie leadership? How do people get in touch with you? What's a great way of saying, here's what Gracie leadership, this is like my sweet spot of enabling or engaging with a client. What's a good way to get a hold of you? What's a good way to understand if John Gracie leadership is good for our company and for my team?
Well, if you want somebody who's going to get in the trenches, if you want somebody who's going to teach leadership from not out of a textbook, which is day-to-day conversations that we have with people. If you want somebody that's going to challenge individuals, what do you mean you didn't pay somebody a compliment this week? Oh, you're too busy. I got you. Okay. So it only takes 5 seconds for me to pay a compliment to Scott McIntyre. Hey, Scott, thanks for coming in late yesterday. You helped us meet our deadline. Thank you very much. So you're trying to tell me you could not take 5 seconds out of your day to recognize somebody who's trying to make your life a little easier. And you can just start to see them becoming a little bit uncomfortable. And they said, hey, hang on a second. This is a learning opportunity. You made the choice. You made the choice not to do it. So just understand, you made the choice not to do it. And if you're going to make a choice not to recognize people, okay, well, they're going to make choices behind your back. They're going to get stingy, and you can't win that game, right? So if you want a leader who's basically going to get in the trenches, have some fun, admit the mistakes they've made over the years, but not only that, how people can actually learn from mistakes, right? Motor tall learning is repetition, repetition, repetition. Well, then you got the right person. If you want somebody who's going to be like Oprah and work the room, I don't read PowerPoints, folks. PowerPoints aren't for me. They're for visual learners out there, right? So maybe people could say I'm a throwback. Okay, that's fine. I'm a throwback. Okay, I'm not going to.
The OG.
So yeah, that's exactly what my whole.
There's your next book title, John. Leadership OG.
No, I have to get an attorney. Trust me.
That's true. That's true. Lori would, yeah, she would have you get an attorney. Well, I feel like you're the vitamin that people know they need, but that they don't take all the time. And it's one of those things where, yeah, you've heard the messages, and I don't think there's a lot of Einstein moments in this world. I think your clarity points and those kind of things are really important. And boy, when you get into as a leader, and I've known this, in my past life and in current, when things get a little bit repetitious or slow, the worst thing to do is to just let it ride, right? Change it up, do something different. And I think that vitamin from Gracie leadership, I think it's the leadership church that people need to think about that really enables them to re-energize, how they're looking and approaching not just their team, but the way that they're enabling business and putting it all together and creating some more energy back into the system, which, we were talking about this before we started the cast here. And I just think there's that level of energy that needs to be infused back into business. And, I'm generally speaking, but before we wrap up here, do you feel like there's like this gap in some of the energy that you saw early on, or maybe at a specific time? And is that something that people should think about? Hey, I don't know what I don't know, and I don't know what I need, but maybe having Gracie leadership come in and give my team a pep talk and really have us think a little bit more clearly about what it is that we're trying to do and where we're trying to go. Is that a good way of thinking about, maybe if you don't know what you need, maybe that's a good way to start, and you get into the points as you get engaged a little more?
The biggest barriers we have to change are habit, experience, and conformity. We're creatures of habit. I mean, we comb our hair the exact same way every day. We brush our teeth, start in the same spot every day. I mean, we go sock, shoe, sock, shoe. I mean, we just become so accustomed to habits, make us feel good. They're not the most effective. Things differently. Experience. Too often people walk around saying, I got 20 years experience turning on that light switch. No, you don't. You got 1 times 20. You're doing the same thing for 20 years, right? And not only that, conformity. When you ask people to do things differently, they're going to say it's weird. Okay, why are you rocking the boat? Why are you asking so many questions? Previous leader never used to do things like that. These are all barriers people put up on why they don't want to take on information, why they don't want to have to look at doing things differently. So there's an old question out there. Why are employees not doing what they should be doing? Well, maybe the leader is not doing what they should be doing.
I don't think I could wrap it up any better way. John, this has been great. Thank you so much for taking some, quality time out of your day. I miss this engagement, and we had this 30 years ago, right? I mean, it's not something that you miss or you forget very easily, but I'm so happy to see that, you've gone into this one to many kind of relationships, and you're propagating kind of that leadership thought process across, the world, quite frankly. And the fact that you get a little bit of that feedback and kickback in, unusual and unlooked at times of Mall of America, or when you're driving down the road, or seeing somebody, or a comment on LinkedIn or whatever. You're obviously in the right place and love what you're doing, and it's just so good to see, how well you're enabling that acumen in the business world. But thanks so much for joining us today. We'd love to see how well things are going forward. Love to see your next book after The Attorney, and when you're in Minnesota and we can get Scott up here, I'd love to hit the white ball around a little bit and share a few more stories and catch up a little bit more. But it's been great. Thanks so much for joining us. We've got a little QR code in the upper left-hand corner for anybody that sees this, hears this. You can get in touch with us. Gracie Leadership is out there as well. We can connect you and connect the dots. Look for some this content to be on LinkedIn, on YouTube, and really just thanks again, John, for joining us today.
Thank you for the platform. Thank you for the feedback. And leaders, don't forget, if you're not coaching it, you're allowing it. Take care.
All right. Thanks, John.
You're welcome.